64 minutes, 65 minutes together here during this session. It's good to be with you here this morning. My name is Mike Wassenaar. I'm the president of Lancer Community Media. Some of the political challenges that we face coming into 2026, but then also some of the opportunities that we need to be taking advantage of, and we need to be thinking about in terms of building power and engagement in our communities to be able to ensure that we're thriving beyond 2026. We've assembled a couple of folks to be talking about sort of what we're seeing across the country in different states, but then also what strategies are to be able, and tactics specifically, we can be doing to be able to be building power and effectiveness at the local level within our state legislature. And I'll kind of get things started off before I hand things over to our colleagues. To my right on stage left is Mike Bradley. If you don't know Mike, you should. He is the principal with Bradley Werner in Minneapolis, St. Paul. He has a long history of advocating for local communities in telecommunications through his practice in Minnesota, and he works with folks all around the United States. I'm proud to say he was my attorney at one point. And I'm saying it as a son of an attorney too, so I know these things. And then to my left on stage right is Lauren Glenn Davitian. If you don't know Lauren Glenn, you should. She is an emerita now.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Lauren Glenn is an emerita.
I'm a legend.
Yeah. A legend in her own time with the Center for Media and Democracy in Burlington, Vermont. They've assembled two practical pieces of information that we want to have you take with you from today's discussions. And you'll see on the screen that there's a QR code up there, which you can use to download the presentations from both Mike and Lauren Glenn. They put together materials, one, taking a look at what's happening in different states, but then two, sort of a playbook specifically for effectiveness at the state level in building political coalitions. So we'll be talking a lot about that over the course of the next 64 minutes. All right. So to start off, just to kind of give you a framework for why we're doing this. In today's ACM newsletter, I talk a lot about the specific threat that is posed by the resuscitation and revival of this zombie legislation, HR 2289, which is been put forward by the House Republicans in the House of Representatives, just passed the House Energy and Commerce Committee on a partisan vote. So no Democrats are supporting this legislation. But part of the entire theory of the case of the legislation is that because there is not rural broadband, enough rural broadband or broadband availability for rural America, we need to get rid of the rights for all Americans for local telecommunications sites. That's the theory of the case, that local government provides, and local and state government, as well as tribal government, is a regulatory underbrush that gets in the way for more freedom. And really our solution is more freedom, right? So getting rid of your rights, you see the theory of the case here. It's a dead idea. It's not proven that getting rid of the rights of local franchises and cable, getting rid of regulatory siding for wireless, getting rid of environmental protections and reviews, getting rid of native heritage protections, actually provides more broadband. There's no correlation at all. It's a dead idea. That's why I talk about sort of reviving the sort of zombie marching that comes forward all the time. I hate zombies. I don't know about you guys. I just hate them. I despise them. I don't seek them out. One of the things that we have to be thinking about is, as we do our advocacy work together across the country, is we need to be stopping bad ideas at the federal level, which squelch good ideas at the state and local level. Right? And this actually kind of works in our wheelhouse because you guys are all working within organizations that are profoundly local. Right? Your networks are local, your connections are local. The power that you derive comes from the local networks that you can enliven and the people that know that you're valuable in your work. Okay? So you got an asset already in the work that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. We have to make sure that, through ACM and through our coalition of work with municipalities, with the U.S. Conference of Mayors, National Association of Counties, National League of Cities, and the National Association of Telecommunication Officers and Advisors, that we're beating back this national threat. We're going to be trying to delay passage of this bill over the course of the next 13 months. Until 2027, this is sort of like an ongoing threat we have to be vigilant about to ensure that we can grow things at the local level. So as you're thinking about talking with folks back home about the challenges that we're facing as we're putting things together, it's a twofold challenge, right? We are fighting to preserve local freedom and local rights. We're fighting against federal preemption, and we're fighting for good policy that will be benefiting local communities. Okay? So don't accept the idea that you have to be just in the State House, or you have to be just working against the feds. It's a joint exercise that we have to be doing. And that's got to be our game over the course of at least the next 13 months. I would suggest that, the zombie threat probably won't be, will continue beyond 2026. But it's literally an idea that just simply won't go away. The meme is, well, we need to get rid of things to be able to be more free, right? And it makes literally no sense to eliminate the rights in the Bronx to have more rural broadband in Maine. It makes no sense, right? But that's the logic that we're fighting. And it has more to do with ideological belief and zombie ideas than it actually has to do with evidence. So, with that, I'll be talking more about 2289 through our work at ACM nationally and our national public policy calls. If you aren't a part of those calls, please join us regularly. If you weren't at last Thursday's call, I'll have a sort of a makeup call this Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. So please join me for that. And if you're a part of ACM, you also get a copy of recordings of those calls. So please let me know if you need any of that information. But if you want to discuss 2289 in some depth, join me Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern for our discussion. Right? I'll give you more information about that. So let's kind of turn to the art of the possible, if we will. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the focus that's happening in different states. Mike will be talking about that. And then Lauren Glenn has developed a handbook for building an engagement power based upon her experiences and the experiences of the coalition in Vermont that we'd like you to think about and try modeling within your communities. So let me turn things over to Mike real quick.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody. It is a real pleasure to be here. Give me a raise of hands. How many of you are here for the first time at ACM Northeast? Okay, I'm joining you. This is my first ACM Northeast conference in person. I was here last year virtually, but really, really pleased to be with you all today. Yeah, we're going to talk about the state of community media and what's at stake, what are our possibilities, and how do we get to where we want to be to make sure that we have community funding going not just for today, but for the next 40 years. Okay. And so it's time for our annual medical exam. We all love going to our annual medical exams, right? But I think it's important. It's important for us to look and see, where are we at right now as far as our community media health goes. And I don't think it's going to surprise maybe any of you of where we're at. So we're seeing for our community media centers, we are primarily funded with fees derived from cable franchising. Okay, so it's franchise fees, it's PEG fees, it's capital grant funding, those types of things. That's primarily where we've been funded, and it's been a model that's worked very well for over 40 years now. But now what we're seeing, and I'm sure you've been seeing this over the last several years, is that cable subscriptions are declining, and they're continuing to decline. And they're starting to decline sometimes at a fairly rapid rate. You know, what I'm seeing now is not only are people cutting the cord and going to, you know, kind of traditional over-the-top places like Netflix and Amazon and Apple TV, but you're seeing the cable operators themselves convert their own subscribers to a streaming service. So if you call up Charter or Comcast today, for example, and say, I'm upset with how high my cable bill is, they'll tell you they have a solution for you. And the solution is to move you to Xumo. And that is causing an even more rapid decline in cable subscriptions because the cable operators claim that a Xumo service, even though it looks and acts just like cable, is not a cable service. That's a discussion for another day. But just know that cable subscriptions are declining. And because they're declining, cable revenue is declining. Franchise fees are based on cable revenue. Pay fees are often based on cable revenue. All of those things are declining. So when we're going to the doctor with our checkup, we have a funding crisis. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody, or at least it shouldn't be at this point, because these have been on a decline now really for 5 years for sure, but really closer to 10 years. Correct?
2018.
Yeah. For those of you who like pictures rather than words, these are kind of the pictures for you. So the chart on your left shows the number of pay TV households, and it's going down under 50 million. I can tell you back in 2018 or so, 2017, it was closer to 100 million. So that's the drop that we're seeing. It's real. The chart on your right is showing cable revenue. And so that was cable revenue in 2023. I can tell you it's down from that. Okay? And then how does that impact franchise fees? You know, not great, right? Not great. So, so we have, you know, a crisis on our hands, a health crisis for community media. But it's, you know, to me, it's not a terminal sentence. There's things that we can do. And I had to come to the Northeast because you all have been doing unbelievable work and leading the nation in getting out to support community media funding. We'll be talking about some of those things. But what are our options? You know, we could do the old wait and see, you know, hope that it gets better. I don't really recommend that one. We can look for, you know, additional funding from our local governments, because typically we're partnering with local governments on funding. You know, local governments have their own funding issues, so again, that's going to be a tough one. Seeking external funding, and you know, we'll go to conferences and we'll see a lot of different ideas on external funding. I think those are all really worthwhile doing. But I would just suggest to you that while it's important, for most community media organizations, we need a more permanent public funding source, like we've been having with cable fees in the past. So I'm really going to focus on the last two solutions, and that's the legal solutions. There's some legal solutions out there I'll visit with you just briefly about, and then legislative solutions on what we've been doing as a group. Okay. So first, the legal cures, and earlier this year, I won't go over this too much in depth, but earlier this year there was a case called Ohio Telecom versus the FCC that came out, and the reason why this case is important is this case really for the first time classified what broadband is in the country right now. And under that case held that broadband is not a telecommunications service. It is an information service. They fall under different titles of the Communications Act. But the important thing is they classified it as not telecommunications. Why that is important is many states regulate telecommunications, and they'll have different regulations for cable television. A lot of times, local governments are preempted from franchising telecommunications companies. Of course, we're allowed to franchise cable operators. But when that case came out, it's caused, city attorneys like me, to look at, to look at broadband and say, okay, well, if it's not telecommunications, and we know it's not cable television, well, what is it? What is it? And what is it under state law? And so, as you're exploring different opportunities when it comes to community media funding, I think broadband franchising is one of those things, but you need to go back and work with your municipal attorneys or community media attorneys, and for your state, determine where does broadband fall, and is there an opportunity to franchise broadband? It takes, a lot of times these, the answers to these questions are in the gray area. And I can tell you in Minnesota, we reviewed that. We determined that broadband could be franchised under state law. And we had a municipality willing to take the lead, and a community media commission lead the effort in making the first broadband franchise in the state of Minnesota just a couple months ago. This will be a big development. This is a big development for community media in Minnesota, and I hope in other places, because that's going to bring in new revenue that wasn't there to support community media. Okay, so that's why I say, relook at how broadband is determined. I think the future of franchising is in broadband, and there's a lot of benefits to franchising broadband. I put, when you look at the slides, you'll be able to link to this article that I put out in Municipal Lawyer earlier this year. But it goes over a lot of the benefits of franchising. It also goes over, our battles at the legislature on broadband franchising, what some of the arguments against broadband franchising were at the state level. But you can just see on the slide what some of the benefits are. Making sure all of your residents are served, making sure that they're all served with equal quality of service, so you have equal access to broadband. Strong consumer protections. A lot of these things you'll see in cable television franchises, but now, if you have a problem with broadband, where do you go? Where do you go? And the answer is, for most, we don't know where to send you, or we try to take care of it ourselves through, our relationships. But consumer protections, we got discounts for seniors and disabled persons. And then franchise fees, there's a 5% franchise fee, which is significant. We matched it with cable television. And then it supports community media. And all of these things are very beneficial to all of you, because as you know, we as community media really are an offshoot of the public benefits of cable television franchising. Okay. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. So this is a little bit towards Mike Wassenaar's comments on how we have to stay vigilant, not just at the state legislature, but we have to know what's going on at Congress. And by the way, with Mike Wassenaar here, you don't have anybody better. He is the advocate for community media when it comes to federal action. But you need to also pay attention to what's going on at the FCC. And there's a lot of things going on at the FCC right now that you need to be able to find ways of participating in. I give an example of the 621 order. People remember the 621 order? That's when the FCC was trying to take non-cash considerations from franchises and make them franchise fees, and using the fair market value of those non-cash contributions. There's a lot of PEG or community media non-cash contributions in franchises. If we were taking the fair market value of that, that would have really impacted franchise fees. It would have really impacted community media. Community media organizations and local governments fought that proceeding all the way, it actually went all the way to the Supreme Court. It was my first time I got to file at the Supreme Court, which I was pretty happy about. But what I was really happy about was when we appealed the decision of the FCC to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, FCC, you have it wrong. While you can include these non-cash contributions and franchise fees, it's not fair market value. It's marginal cost. Well, that made it almost zero. So it kind of wiped out that part of the order almost completely. So it's just one example of how participating at the FCC can make a real difference to community media. That one made a huge difference. I can tell you right now, literally right now, we're in a process that the FCC is attempting to eliminate other fees that would also benefit community media, including broadband fees. FCC has no business touching broadband, no business. But here they are. A number of local governments submitted comments that were due November 18th. Reply comments are due December 17th, so coming up. So there's still an opportunity to participate. I encourage you all to participate. And then keep an eye out, there's a wireless notice of proposed rulemaking. To me, the wireline one is kind of the biggest one for local governments. But, sometimes we've been looking at like pole attachment fees as being a possible solution. Well, then we gotta look at that wireless notice of proposed rulemaking, okay?
Why does the
So-
FCC have no business?
So the FCC has no business of controlling or doing any regulation over broadband because Congress gave them no authority to do any regulation of broadband. So when broadband was classified as a Title I service, that took the FCC completely out of the picture from doing any regulation, essentially. And that's backed up by not only the statutory text, but also the cases that have been determined under that statute. Okay. I'll go over the legislative cures at a very high level and then turn it over to Lauren Glenn, I think, because I'm going too long, I can
No,
tell.
you're not.
But there are a number of legislative cures out there, and you'll see the Northeast has been far and away the most active in the country. I mean, it is the Northeast, Minnesota, and that's it. Now that's gonna change. I can pretty much guarantee you that's gonna be changing here this coming session. But we've been the leaders. We as the Northeast and Minnesota have been the leaders. And there's a bunch of different ways that we've been looking at. Not all of them have been successful, but there's some that are getting super, super close, okay? So we have appropriations, so a straight government appropriation to fund access television. Lauren Glenn and her team at VAN were successful. They got over $1 million just in May to help fund access television. That's a huge development. I believe Connecticut also has looked at that, but we haven't been successful in Connecticut yet. Gross earnings taxes and fees. We've looked at that in Connecticut and New York. Connecticut 2 years ago was right on the doorstep of success. Last year was a little slower, but as Lauren Glenn will go over it, this is a process, and it's a multi-year process, and it's about developing relationships, etc. Streaming video taxes. is another, very popular one. New York, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Vermont have all looked at those. And I think all of them have had hearings on this.
Yeah, and one kind of quick note on this, if you're a Massachusetts organization, there's a legislative alert going on right now this week to be able to push for the legislation. You've probably gotten something from Dave Gauthier, but if you don't have that, let me know so that you can be doing action this week. Specifically on pushing forward the streaming bill in Massachusetts. Just kind of a highlight that.
Yeah, and that bill right now in Massachusetts is right on the doorstep. So it's in Ways and Means in both the House and Senate, from what I understand. And it's gonna be critical for folks in Massachusetts to be, at the right time, connecting with legislators. Okay, broadband franchising is another one. I've been kind of the center of that in Minnesota. We've had the Equal Access to Broadband Act. That is an act that gives specific authority to local governments to franchise broadband in the state with specific requirements to fund community media. And then lastly, there's some model legislation that's in the works. And just be on the lookout for that. Lauren Glenn may talk about that, Mike Wassenaar may talk about that as well. If I have a couple more minutes, do I have a couple more minutes? I'll just try to go very quickly. Here's the links to Vermont. Vermont's had great success in getting the appropriation. But you can see it started at a different level. They started talking about pole attachment fees as a possible way of funding access television or community media. And then that changed to the tax on streaming services, then ultimately came to this appropriation. I don't think Vermont's done, right? I think Vermont is gonna continue to move forward, maybe with some different ideas. But that's just a nice example, I think, of the multi-year process. We're rolling with the punches a little bit, we're listening to what legislators are telling us, and then ultimately having success. Massachusetts, we just talked about, they have this Act to Modernize Funding for Community Media. The state representative from Massachusetts was at the ACM National Conference in Boston this year. She was fantastic. And I just love to see the enthusiasm by a state representative. And she told us at the conference, this is gonna pass. It is going to pass. And when you look at the list of co-sponsors, it is impressive how many co-sponsors are on that bill. But it's taken a while, it's not just this year. They've started a couple of years ago, and it's been building ever since. And that'll be kind of a theme, I think, that you'll see as we talk about these things. But a really unique way of determining funding levels and then assessing those funding levels for the support of community media. It's a great bill. New York has been very active with state legislation as well. Last year they were included in a telecommunications reform act. That didn't really move anywhere. There was a Community Media Reinvestment Act 2 years ago. But now we're working on legislation for 2026 called the Tech Equity Access Media New York Act. So the Team New York Act, and I just encourage you to talk to Erica Bradley, my cousin. She's not really my cousin, but we call each other cousin.
Cousin.
See Erica, and know that is moving forward. There's a link in the slides to Team New York. But the important thing is make that connection. If you're from New York, you need to see Erica, and you need to talk about what you can do to be in the group, to be participating. Connecticut, I won't go over Connecticut too much, but they did have a lot of movement in 2024 on this community access bill. Last year, not so much. But again, you'll see this is a multi-year effort. It started really in 2022. They had a report that was prepared on community access television that was released and used as a basis for the 2024 legislation. I think there was some change in legislators between the 24 and 25 session maybe. But I haven't been able to talk to anybody from Connecticut super recently, but I think it's Pua Ford, right? Pua Ford. If you're from Connecticut, you need to contact Pua Ford, and you need to be on that list of supporters. Minnesota, we used a lot of different approaches. So like I said, we used the Equal Access to Broadband Act. That was probably the biggest effort for us on getting clarity on franchising broadband and then also having specific community media funding obligations in that. But we also looked at some streaming and digital media taxes. And then this last one, this legacy funding, was really kind of, I don't know, I just thought it was a really good, unique idea. I was disappointed I didn't think of it myself. But in Minnesota, they have a constitutionally required sales tax that goes to fund the arts.
And duck hunting.
Well, yes, the arts. So we would be, we'll make shows about hunting.
It's an arts, culture, and historical.
Yeah, and it's constitutionally mandated.
Right.
So there was no new tax involved. It's already been decided. And so the only thing that has to be done is the legislature has to look at the funding and then decide who gets the money. And community media organizations in Minnesota did a fantastic job, in my opinion, of making the case that they should be included. And this will, I don't know if it will surprise you or not, but the supporters came back and said, well, we decided not to include you at all because you need more than what we can give you. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. Just get us in. Then we can talk about more later. But anyway, that was the result at the end of last session. 2026 might be a little bit different for us. So in the past, we've been really looking at that legacy funding, looking at the Equal Access to Broadband Act. We're probably going to be looking more at a maintain our authority that we found when I talked to you about those legal cures. We're going to really focus in on just making sure that we maintain that legal argument that we have to franchise broadband. Okay. And I think this is my last slide, but this is not incurable. We can beat this, and there are cures, and there's cures that have been successful. So we absolutely should be taking some joy, really, in what the state of Maine has done. If there's anybody from the state of Maine, Maine has been unbelievable as far as getting community media legislation through. Vermont's success, outstanding. Massachusetts is right there. I expect Massachusetts law to go through. That act to go through, and that is going to be a super exciting, and it's going to generate a lot of interest from your colleagues across the country. I think it's going to be a catalyst for legislation to come. Minnesota's had some success through legal means, but also they've gotten they got the Equal Access to Broadband Act all the way to the House floor 2 years ago. So we can beat this. We can beat it together. We have work to do. But now the question is, what should you be doing now? And Dr. Lauren Glenn is here to tell us. Thank you, Ed.
It sounds like a TV talk show from the 1980s, Dr. Lauren Glenn. Yeah.
Well, I'm a naturopath, so.
Okay.
Why don't we put that slide, your first slide, with the QR code so folks can get the presentation? Because what I passed out is a QR code for the handbook that we wrote. So I want Michael's presentation to be, it's in this corner, but also the very first slide. pass it up in the, yeah. Great. Yeah, that up there, folks want to. We can also make it available, but just, yeah, take a picture of that.
Yeah, and then if
We'll
you,
send it out.
if you lose your phone after today's presentation, it is available on the ACM website under the member section, so.
Tree pose first, yeah, we could do a little breathing exercise as well. All right, so good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Lauren Davitian. I work at CCTV Center for Media and Democracy, and I work as the public policy person, and I work in conjunction with our colleagues across the state, Vermont Access Network. We have 24 community media centers, and we work very closely together on many things, including CPG renewals, franchise renewals, and legislation. And we started working probably in 2018 to build a case for support in the legislature. And the short story on that was COVID was probably the best thing that happened to us, in that we were recognized as a really important partner in keeping the wheels of democracy turning by the very quick innovation that we did, just like you all did, to bring people in their homes into public meetings as quickly as possible so they could participate remotely. And the legislature recognized that. And so we were able to receive some ARPA funding for that. And we also, like Connecticut, passed a piece of legislation to set up a study committee. Because the very first thing to underscore is that any legislative success is a really long game. This is not something that happens overnight. You know, think of your, just even from a development perspective, grants that you get. You're not going to necessarily get a grant the very first time you meet with a grant officer. You have to develop relationships. And fortunately, relationship building is something we are really good at. Relationship building is what we do. Community media is really not first about technology, it's first about building community. So we have a head start over a lot of entities that try to get something passed in the legislature. Not only because of our ability to organize, all the people that we work with and represent, but we have legislators and people who wield political power coming into our studios. And if they're not coming in on a regular basis, which I'm sure they are, actually raise a hand raising. How many people have people with power, elected officials, coming into their studios on a regular basis? So, great. It's almost everyone in the room. So that's local officials, state officials, federal officials, just keep getting them in there. Because every time they walk in the door, they understand that they are contributing to something vitally important. So, the number one piece about organizing is this is a relationship game. The number two piece is that this is a long, long game. It requires patience, and it requires a group of people that are willing to, in addition to all the other things they have to do in a given day, put their shoulder to the wheel of advocacy. And I cannot stress enough, I would just say from my point of view, and that's just my point of view, that the single most important thing that we have to do as leaders in the community media movement is put our effort behind advocacy. Because without this advocacy work, we will not have a structural foundation for the work that we do. So I will say no more about that because that's essentially what this workshop is about. The Alliance for Community Media and the Alliance for Communications Democracy has put together a piece of sample legislation based on New York and Massachusetts streaming tax. And the streaming tax idea is essentially an excise tax. So it's a tax on the companies, if I'm correct, and it would be distributed between local access operations, the state, and the local franchising authorities. Because local franchising authorities in the states where franchising is done locally, like in Massachusetts, for example, unlike Vermont, these communities are losing revenue too. So they have a vested interest in joining in this streaming tax proposition. So this sample legislation that the Alliance for Communications Democracy has put together with their legal brain trust with the support of the ACM is a piece of legislation that is available to people all across the country. And it occurred to us that it's one thing to have a piece of legislation, it's an entirely other thing to get it passed. And so we put together this handbook on how to get a piece of legislation passed. And I'm going to go through some of the highlights, given that this is happening actively in Massachusetts and in New York, but also to remind us, especially those of us maybe not working in the leadership realm of getting this legislation passed, the roles that we have to play in mobilizing our people, our producers, our board members, our communities, when those action alerts come through that need broad-based support. Some action alerts just really need to go to committee heads, and some action alerts need to go to the Speaker of the House. Some action alerts might even need to go to the governor. So there are different calls for action at different times that require different audiences. So, thank you, Michael. Yeah, that's fine. So the most important thing to think about when undertaking any of this is, what is the objective? It may be to get a streaming tax passed. It may be to look into a broadband tax. I mean, the most exciting thing 2025 for me is this Minnesota bill that you have done. And obviously I'm a policy wonk if that's the most exciting thing that's happened. But the fact that we could potentially pursue broadband franchising opens a door that, thank you, Michael, for opening that door. You might also, success might be simply, maybe in the state of New Hampshire, getting a working group, getting the legislature to have a study committee to put together some ideas that gets buy-in from the legislature because they're supporting a working group. Maybe a little money's needed, maybe not, so that you can then lay out policy options that the next session you can bring to the legislature and wave around. So there's a lot to be said for having documents to wave around in the legislature, because the study committee that we had a whole host of ideas about how to generate revenue for community media, and had legal analysis in it that allowed us to get a workaround the federal preemption called the Internet Tax Freedom Act, which makes it illegal for states to, quote, tax the internet. So we had to come up with different ways that were viable, and those were laid out in the study committee. So what is it that you're trying to accomplish is the first thing to think about. And then the leadership team. Again, even if you are not on the front line of organizing, I suggest that every community media center have its own advocacy leadership team. And that might be a subcommittee of your board. You might already be doing this. But if you're not, think about who are the most sort of charismatic, outgoing people who are willing to articulate for you in front of others these core ideas, people who are really good at messaging, and people who are not afraid to make phone calls and reach out and be your forward, advanced people to help organize locally. Because all of us at a state level have to depend on the organizing levels, your levels of organizing all the way down. Michael?
Well,
Quick question for you. If I work for a city or a school district, who is that advocate? As opposed to, well, I mean, I think there's like a couple different opportunities typically. One would be folks who are involved specifically in that advocacy function for the municipality, right? Or alternatively, people like Mike who get hired by the municipalities, right? To be doing that sort of advocacy work. But, the thing I think is super important is be a team exercise. And you're right about the advocacy function. I think it's a mistake for us to think that there is no advocacy function at all for an organization. And regardless of whether you're a P, E, or G, or some sort of combination of those, but we've got to be finding those people and then working in concert with them so that you're doing that collective action at the state level.
Yeah. Does anyone have an example of that in your, yes, hi.
Yeah, so I work for a municipality 5 minutes down the road. Pretty much, okay. All right, so I work for a municipality like 5 minutes down the road here on Route 9. First of all, our town actually encourages us to advocate on behalf of our departments. And then two, as long as I wrote the letter, the select board chair signed it for us. So that's one way a municipality could do it.
Right, because there's all kinds of action alerts. There are federal action alerts, there are FCC filings, there's big efforts like this. So again, building that advocacy capacity within the organization is something to think about doing. If it's not happening now, it's 101. And it's why we've had success in Vermont, because over the past 40 years, advocacy has been at the foundation of everything that we do. And as leaders of organizations, we've had to wear the advocacy hat. And then your partnerships, there are all kinds of potential partnerships. So this year, we're going for a $1.89 million request to the legislature as part of the Secretary of State's budget. And this year, we're doing this with the community radio folks. There are 10 community radio stations. Some of them are low power, 4 of them are affiliated with community media centers. And we are joining for the first time in a joint request. So it's adding $90,000 to our 1.8 million request. And just to say, in Vermont, we did pose a poll attachment tax, which was a $10 poll tax, which didn't fly for a variety of reasons. One is no one liked the name. All right.
Poll taxes have a bad reputation.
No one liked the name. So we actually had to refer to it as the PAT when we talked about it. I'm not kidding you. And then the second, so that idea sort of was not, it was actually, it's an elegant, beautiful policy solution, but didn't fly. So the next thing was someone in the Senate Finance Committee took an old version of the New York streaming tax and put it forward. And it was decided that they didn't really want to wield a tax that year. I mean, it's not a popular thing, and the governor doesn't like new taxes. And so in the case of Vermont, what was decided was, we're going to simply put you in the budget without a revenue source. So we didn't get the policy win, which of course would have made me very happy, but we got the money. So sometimes you're not going to get the outcome that you started with. It doesn't, especially in the legislature. There is no straight line in the legislature. Decisions are not made on rational basis. Just remember that, and don't be surprised when things go very sideways, and you can't imagine why. It's just how legislatures work.
You talk about continuously building trust and leadership. I almost want to kind of underline the idea that what you're doing is a practice. It's not like you go to the legislature and then you go and then you leave. It's an ongoing process that's necessary for the growth and furtherance of the field. Right.
And really, if we don't go any further in this presentation, because there's more to it, we're not going to get to everything, these are the fundamental concepts for you. And I just like to underscore, we work with a lobbying firm called Action Circles. They have been our lobbyist, and their model for organizing is relational. And you can see from this model, the center is leaders, and then there's sort of the next group of people, the high risk takers, the lower risk takers, and then the interested people, and then likely interested people. So not everyone is going to be involved in your effort in the same way, and you want to identify what level of involvement and commitment that they are going to have, which is going to inform what kind of action they can take on your behalf, and how you build trust to move people from likely interested to low risk takers to higher risk takers. You know, low risk taker might be sending an email or making a phone call. High risk taker might be someone who actually physically goes to the building on your behalf. You know, the highest risk takers moving into the leaders may actually be testifying So people aren't gonna just show up ready to testify. We're cultivating people, and this is what we do in our centers. Someone comes in, they wanna make a show, they start to make a show, they become a regular producer, maybe then you recruit them for the board. I mean, this is something we actually know how to do very well. And then the other thing is, you really need to be savvy about how things work. And a power map, I just love power maps so much. Megan is in the back. We just love making maps of things. But one of the important things is to understand where the power lives and who you need to influence based on what you've decided to do. Both the champions, people who might be a bill sponsor, someone who might be on the committees of jurisdiction that are your allies, and also your opponents. Who are they and what are their potential objections? And you also have to have a pretty good database. You're keeping track of who these legislators are, when you've met with them, what they've said, how likely they are to support you, if they need more attention. And then, as I said, if you're gonna be in a legislative arena, you really would be wise to hire a lobbyist, because the lobbyist is in the building all the time, and you're not. And the lobbyist has relationships that we don't. And the lobbyist understands how things work. And the lobbyists have been friends with certain people for a long time, maybe even grew up with them, as in the case of the head of Ways and Means, been our lobbyist. So that makes a big difference. And then in the handbook is a list of questions that you can ask when you're trying to hire a lobbyist, which is that you want them to be helpful to you. You don't want them to just tell you when committee meetings are. You want them really working the building when you're not there and bringing you in when you need to be. And you also need to understand the cost structure, which brings us to the next point, which is you need sufficient resources. So this is a little snapshot. I mean, Vermont is a little state, right? So our budget is not the giant budget, but it's about 60 grand for our lobbyists when all is said and done. We've hired Nancy Werner, Michael's partner, to help verify that the kinds of legislation we're doing has legal grounding, and she's come to testify as star witnesses. So having legal access to people across the country that can give legitimacy to your cause, someone like Michael would be an ideal person. And then you're gonna have events. Now, we don't actually spend $5,000 in grassroots organizing events, but you might. If you have everybody come to New York State to the Capitol building and you want to feed them lunch, or you're having a legislative briefing, or in our case, we had an ice cream social that was incredibly successful because we had this ice cream social, which I guess legislators just love freaking ice cream. and right after the House Government Ops Committee voted, we brought ice cream into them, and they will never forget this for the rest of their life. And then the legislative strategy, which requires a lot of moving parts, which is why having a lobbyist is really helpful. But you need to know the schedule. How often do they meet? When do they go on recess? When do they come back? What is even the term? Who are the committees of jurisdiction? How do they lean? What's their thinking? And then you need to prepare your testimony and talking points. And I've got this little graph, just like Michael's, which is pay TV versus non-pay TV. So you want to have pictures. Legislators have very short attention spans. They are dealing with so many things. And I have spent hours preparing testimony just to go into a room and see them doing everything else but listening to my testimony. So if I have one picture or two pictures that show what the need is and what the ask is, that's really about you have to have the background testimony, but that's really what you're dealing with. It's incredibly short attention spans.
And a short period of time to testify as well. So, you might think you can go up there and speak for a while. That's
But you
probably
may have
2 minutes.
2 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, if that.
And in Vermont, we get a little more time, but we don't get any more attention.
Again, the ice cream helps.
The ice cream really helps. And then a communication strategy. Again, these are all things that we do in our everyday work as community media centers. So we are one-armed paper hangers. We know how to do this. And they are, honestly, these messages came from ChatGPT. I just want to say that was a very helpful resource. So if you put into ChatGPT or some similar AI, give me a legislative strategy for passing a streaming tax, it will lay it out for you. I mean, I'm not saying you have to vet it, but it's incredibly, it's a
It'll get
good
you
start. It's a
It'll be
great
good
start.
too.
So, these messages are kind of a nice way to start and thinking visually. And then we'll keep going, because you have many ways to meet with people. And I want to just say one other thing, that if you don't remember anything I've said, thank you notes. Thank you notes, thank you notes.
Gratitude is a superpower.
It's a superpower because legislators don't get thank you notes. People don't thank them. And honestly, if you had a campaign in your community media center to send thank you notes, handwritten, to your legislators before or after a vote especially, they will never forget you. And that's honestly, I've just got to say, that's a secret power. And your mother taught you that. I hope. And if she didn't, I am reminding you. And then there's, okay, years now have passed. This has not happened in a year, right? Years have passed. And we don't have years, so let's say 2 years have passed. And you're at the point where there's a floor vote. So you've gotten through all the committees, there's gonna be a floor vote. And you've got a tax, let's say it's a tax. I mean, if it's a working group, okay. But if it's a tax, that's a lot of organizing, mobilizing you need to do to make sure that this passes. So you're gonna have a whole strategy related with mobilizing people to secure the floor votes. And if you have a governor who doesn't want new taxes, you are gonna probably have a veto session. So you're just kind of, you're just girding your loins all the time. It is one thing after another. And then you're gonna celebrate the win. And then, as Maine has found, you have to enforce whatever's been passed. Or you need to create a contract to get the money that's been allocated. Or there is an administrative rulemaking procedure that follows what it is you need to do. So this is an ongoing process, which is why thinking about it as a long-term, built into your infrastructure capacity to do advocacy work is vitally important, because it will take many forms and it will be ongoing, as you all in this room already know. And I think, as Michael has said, both Michaels, this is very doable. We have the people on our side, and we know, I mean, sometimes it doesn't seem that way today. Sometimes it seems dark, and that people power doesn't amount to much. But honestly, people power amounts to a lot, especially when it comes to legislative accountability. So I think we've got a firm foundation to grow from.
We've got a couple minutes if you've got questions or reflections or anything you want to have, you want to pose to me, Mike, or Lauren Glenn here before we're done at 12:05.
So I wanted to mention one thing. When Lauren Glenn says that, the facts are on our side, we have support. We have built-in support. Believe it or not, we have built-in support. The issue comes is legislators have no idea how you're funded. They have no idea that, the state of our financial health right now is poor. And so we have to educate to get them there. Because, I mean, it's almost comical when you go and talk to legislators. I had one legislator tell me that, I thought you were funded just like PBS. Right? I mean, that's a sitting legislator. That's what they think. And it goes beyond that, if I could just for one more second. But you may also find that city councils have no idea. You may find that your board has no idea. Even if they've been on your board for 20 years, they have no idea. How that happens, I have no idea. Okay, but that happens. I mean, and it shows the importance of educating along the way to your board, to your councils, and then to the legislature.
Brian, you've got your hand up there, go ahead. And I'm not sure if you can speak.
Yeah,
so I can hear you.
it's fine. So my main note out of this whole discussion was exactly this point. I'm gonna do a walking tour. I'm gonna go to, we have all these committee meetings. I have a routine that I do with the PTO president's meeting with the superintendent. Principals meet with the superintendent. Sometimes I get 15 minutes in there. So I'm gonna start a walking tour and just start this rhetoric and say, hey, just catching everybody up. This is how we're funded. This is how we, this is the danger, all that stuff. But it also made me think, at every meeting we cover, there's a public comment, and I'm gonna hit every public comment and do the same thing moving forward.
Such a good idea. Love that.
Without burdening the meeting too much. With the concise, short, and concise. Yeah. It's very smart, sorry.
I have a really stupid question.
No stupid question.
No such thing.
What if we invited our legislators, like our local legislators, to be on our crew for a night? To really see what we do and appreciate it a little more.
Yeah. It's just like a drive by with the cops.
Yeah.
For the skill contract.
Oh, yeah. Sure, right.
The thing I think the idea, the spirit is great. I think you want to structure the experience so that you're not, have like a director barking at them for being out of focus or things like that. So, for example, if you had, this happens in a lot of communities, like a high school sports event that you have like students doing production work in. If you wanted to have like a couple of local legislators be just, in the wings observing, and you're talking about it as a special opportunity to see things behind the scenes, and then they talk with the volunteers about why it's meaningful, right? So you probably want to structure the experience, because I don't think that they will want to work the gear or schlep XLR cords or things like that. But I think the idea of like a behind the scenes treat is a good one.
Can I just add to that? One of the things that we're gonna be looking at in Minnesota is giving community media access to every single sporting event in the state of Minnesota for high school sports. Because what we've been seeing more and more is we're being excluded. And we're being excluded from like hockey rinks.
Yeah.
Hockey's big here, hockey's really big in Minnesota too. And we're being excluded. And when you look at our games by community media, they're unbelievable. We have multi-shots, we've got a play-by-play color, it's fantastic. We are being excluded for a pan camera with no audio. Are you kidding me? So when it comes, and this is to Lauren Glenn's point about having a visual, what I've asked for is like a 20-second, 30-second video, and you go on Twitter or somewhere and you'll see a side-by-side of what's going on. I want a side-by-side of my community media coverage versus a panel coverage. It's night and day.
Same is true of government meetings. Less exciting, but the same principle is that we provide coverage that those cameras in the back are not so.
Whatever you don't good at, go ahead.
So 2 quick things. In the one, love the idea of getting on the crew, but we actually have city councilors who have been commentating some of our sports. And so if they like to talk,
Yeah.
like if they're on the council, blah, 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 blah. So don't discount them, for that. Second thing is the relationship building. We had a couple of kids who came in with their family. They were doing homeschooling and we worked with them and showed them video and they did some programs. And when it came time to send letters for that bill in Massachusetts, I contacted the mother and said, hey, can the girls write a letter? And they did, and they sent it in, and my senator's office contacted me because of that letter and said, we just heard from these kids, blah, 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 blah. I go, yeah. That's what we're fighting for here. Okay. So don't discount the youth, I guess. If you've got kids that are active in your facility, get them involved in this.
Great, that's really great. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Liz, I'm from Athol Orange Community Television. We just did a 4-day Christmas auction, holiday auction, I'm Jewish, so I shouldn't, anyway. And Senator Joe Comerford, who is one of the sponsors on the streaming bill, as well as Representative Susanna Whips, who's in support of the streaming bill, they both hosted for about 90 minutes, just doing the auction, just reading the cards, doing what we had them do, and they're there for our major events in Athol and Orange. I will say have neglected to be in conversations with other stations about what we can be doing to push the streaming bill forward. I was looking on my phone and the last update on the State House website was July. So I think that Western Massachusetts, or Massachusetts in general, if we could sit together at lunch and talk about some things we could do. My first thought is PSAs that we could all be playing to explain how we get funding, or, I don't know, let's talk about it.
That's good, good brainstorm.
I mean, the main thing is you're sitting together talking about how to localize, right? And we are shoemakers' children, it's kind of funny how we don't use video.
So, two things on that very, very salient point. One, coordinate with Mass Access in terms of the specific actions that are being asked for right now. Like, there's some specific things being asked for. The general education work about how you're funded, yes. You know, we should have been doing it 20 years ago, right? Yes, you know, don't substitute one for the other. Yes to both, but also make sure that we're working in concert with the entire Massachusetts team.
Any final comments, questions?
Yes, I have one then.
Yes, was there, I heard a voice. Yeah, that was yours.
So
The voices in my head are here.
this is just kind of something silly, but years ago I was a scoutmaster for Boy Scouts. And so we would go to camp every year. And when I became a scoutmaster, I got the boys together somewhere early in camp, and I said, okay, I bought postcards. All right, boys, we're gonna send postcards to your mothers. And okay, Mr. Bradley, we'll do that. And the reason I mention it is none of those boys knew how to write a postcard. They did not know how to do a letter. And so if you fall into that group, those kids are now 27 years old, okay? So those kids never learned how to write a letter. And my kid is included in that. He was probably the most ridiculous written one of them all. But, you know, don't be afraid. Those powerful letters, this is another one where I'm kind of embarrassed. I didn't think about that. You know, when I first started practicing in this area, the guy I was working with was a former state senator, and he would send personal letters all the time. And of course, I probably thought that was dumb, you know, at the time. But I think it's brilliant today because now they're not receiving anything handwritten.
Yeah.
So it's gonna stick out, and it's gonna stick out in a really good, positive way. That's genius.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
So-
and just to say, it only takes, I don't know what the number is, but something like 3 to 6 contacts to a legislator about a bill is way more than they might get about any other bill. So we're not talking about massive numbers, we're just talking about consistent, built-in structural framework for advocacy.
The drumbeat.
Constructive.
You have to have the constructive
Constructive
drumbeat. It can't be, yeah, right. So, okay, this has been great. A couple quick takeaways. One, you've got access to the guide, okay? Please make sure that other people get access to it as well. So share it with your colleagues and share it also with folks within your organization. Particularly, I would say, you know, having board advocates is super, super important. Many times board of directors don't know why they're in the room, advocacy for the furtherance of the mission of the organization is a key one. So, so engaging people who have time to be able to advocate on behalf of your organization is super, super important. 2, you've got Mike's material in terms of sort of the overview of where things are. Think about that particularly if you're in a state where there is not a lot of legislative work happening right now, because we want to try to kickstart activities, right? And then the other sort of thing to note is that, we want to be there for you, so please join us for our regular discussions on public policy. We're joking about this a little bit. Sometimes it seems like higher math for people. I want to try to break it down as well, in terms of sort of how things work and why things work. So this is a team sport. You should be a part of it. So please, join us as a part of the national calls that take place. And then also invite folks in your organization who you think would want to be either educated or engaged on national issues. We're going to be doing more advocacy work to fight the sort of national legislation as well, to make sure that we can actually create these positive models within states. So be prepared to be a part of that for the course of the next
And
year.
don't forget to ask questions. There are no dumb questions, really. I mean, this is arcane. Title I, Title II, what is that even, right? So you just need to be asking and asking over and over. Please, please.
And with that, I want to thank you all for being here. And we'll be around for questions. Thank you so much. I think lunch starts in a few minutes upstairs. So thank you so much.